flags. Kick off the weekend, all right. It's the Growler Friday Show. It's Dey Light.
All right. Welcome into the latest edition of Dey Light. Paul Dehner Jr., Mark Chalafook here with you on a delightful Friday. Happy weekend, everybody. Happy weekend. Mark, where are we at? We're in Grand Rapids.
Yes, beautiful Grand Rapids. That's where everybody wants to be in February. It's Grand Rapids, Michigan. You were in Florida. Florida may be number one, but number two for most people, their travel destinations. Grand Rapids, Michigan in February. Can't beat it.
Yeah. Well, big show for you there this weekend. So good. You've got 4 pillows stacked. They went a little light on the pillows with you here in this hotel room. A little disappointed.
I know.
To tell you the truth.
I know. We're going to have to do it harder next time I'm in a hotel. A good hotel. Good little city. I like a little walkable downtown and the clubs downtown. So that I like all that stuff. More pillows and better weather. That's what we're missing here in Michigan.
Yeah. Well, you're doing the thing. I am back. I'm back from Florida. It was a great week. There's nothing it doesn't hit quite as hard as digging your car out at the long-term airport parking lot after coming back from Disney World. Like that is. That's rough. It felt like flying into Siberia yesterday as we descended back in. It was, or like flying into the Rocky Mountains or something. It was just snow covered, cold. Everybody seemed bitter. It was gray, just ice and snow all over my car. Really just a brutal re-entry period.
That feels like a prank almost, like you show back up to Cincinnati. They're like, here, welcome back. You're covered in snow and your schedule is going to be full of things that you have to catch up on since you missed work and school and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it was worth it. Good trip.
Oh, it was a great trip. Many Disney thoughts that we can get to in Dad Life later. It's Dad Life heaven down there in Disney World in Orlando. So we've got plenty of that to get to. Of course, we've got plenty to get to here on a Bengals side of things. It wasn't a very newsy week.
I know. No emergency podcast was needed.
No emergency podcast necessary. A touch of things. We'll get on to a few things that happened here in a little bit, but we did mock drafts are happening. Not happy about it.
Gotta love it. Gotta love mock draft season.
I did a thing, and there's one thing about mock draft culture, where we've decided that everything has to be 0.0. Right? It's got to be 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0,
17.0.
When did this happen? When did we decide as big draft complex culture that everyone has to .0 your stuff? Why can't it just, there's got to be other ways. It could be 1A, 2A, B, C. We could use March. We could use the week. We could use whatever. Just one, right? You don't even have to give it a number, right? You could just continue to say, here's another mock draft. No one's following along, right?
Here's this week's mock draft.
And so it was really an opportunity. Why are we not using the decimal? Why is no one using the decimal? Why has there ever in the history of time been a 0.5? And so I felt like this was the year, okay? I was asked, nudged, politely told to do a mock draft before free agency in the combine, which is pretty much against all my rules, but I get it. People want it, right? So it's not going to be a 1.0. It's time to utilize the decimal. So it doesn't really count towards my first submission, but I'm doing it. So I gave it a 0.5.
I don't like this.
Why do you not like this?
You're being
too
bold.
Breaking some like long-standing rule or tradition.
I'm worried about the Big Draft Illuminati showing up at your house one day and you're going to open your door. They're going to be there like, we need to have a conversation. You've been barking up this tree too long. What are you going to come for next? Draft grades? Are we not going to hand out letter grades anymore after the draft? Are we going to start scoring it like it's an Olympic gymnastics routine and give it like a 9.5 for this draft? And the Bengals had a 6.4. Are we going to lose the sanctity of the letter grade for the draft? You're like really going to start ruffling feathers here.
I like that. I think we go full ice skating, multiple judges, each holding up like scores. Like we could do a Bengals media grade session, but it's not grades where we all just have a card and we hold it up old school cartoon style, Where like at the end it's me doing the Chuck Norris with the thumb down, up, and then pointing up. Like I think there's many different ways. I think we throw the entire grading system out. We defund big draft culture and we do it all differently. We just changing everything. This is my start. So yeah, maybe the Illuminati does show up at my house. We're like, we hear you've been messing with the decimal.
All change has to start with somebody, and maybe this is your hill that you're going to rally on, and we're going to get the Growl Pals up there, and we're going to push this across the country, and it's going to start with this. And
if you hear of, I'm in the hospital or I was poisoned or something like that, just know it's probably somebody connected to Mel Kiper's crew.
Who did you have them taking in 0.5 of your mock draft?
0.5. I had him taking Oregon's Derek Harmon, and then there was a beat writer mock draft, which is a very good exercise that we like to do, but I don't really count it until post free agency. So we'll do a post free agency beat writer mock draft. To me, it's one of the most important ones where everybody has more of a real feel for what their teams are going to do. And that one, I had him taking Walter Nolan, a defensive tackle from Ole Miss. It's been very defensive tackle. There's a group. I had a big board where it's there's different groups of directions they can go. I don't think they're super position specific in this draft because there's real depth at defensive tackle and defensive line. Daniel Jeremiah did his yearly sort of draft conference call with media, and it's insane. It's like this marathon session where he just goes on and it spills his knowledge on everything. He went for 2 hours and 45 minutes yesterday taking questions about players and, it was,
that's awesome.
If you've been following him, some of this stuff already, but I mean, he pointed out he has basically double the amount of starter level defensive tackle grades in this draft compared to last year's. Now, last year's was very, very low. This year's very, very high. We've talked about the depth there. The second, third round, those day two guys are going to get a lot more value, a lot better player there on the defensive line than you have in previous years. That includes it. Just so it opens up round one, I think, to not feel pigeonholed, and we'll see what happens in free agency. But I think there are offensive linemen there, Kelvin Banks, Tyler Booker, types of guys that look like really high-end guards that could come in and be day one badass starter, that you could go there and then collect your defensive line and utilize the depth of the draft on day two. There's lots of that stuff that we'll get into. We'll talk about at the Combine and all that stuff, which Combine's coming up next week. Leave for the Combine on Sunday. So I'll be up there from next week. We'll be doing some shows from up there. I'll be doing one with Charlie. Zach Taylor and Duke Tobin are talking on Tuesday. So we'll have reaction to that on Tuesday evening. We'll have a pod. I think Charlie and I are going to do a pod on Tuesday evening from up there in Indianapolis with all the stuff that's going on. And it should be fun. It should be a good week.
That's exciting. I mean, what makes it challenging for you and all your mock drafts and the Combine stuff is when you have a team that's got so many holes. There's a lot of different ways they can go with that first round pick. There's a lot of different things, a lot of different positions that they need a dude in. And it's going to give you a lot of options this year. I hope you get some news out there from the Combine. Maybe Duke Tobin will break some news for you, or Zach will say something interesting. I feel like we desperately need some news. I know it's going to come, especially with like the T. Higgins stuff will come later. And, some of these big contracts will get sorted out in March. But I feel like we need it. We need it as soon as we can get it, because some of the national media narratives are just like so unbearable at this point. It's like, because there's nothing new to talk about and everyone just wants to freak. Did you hear what they said on First Take about the Bengals? Dude. The cheap Bengals. They can't afford to pay their players. Then you always get this one too. Like this one's recircled. Is Joe Burrow elite? Are we seriously doing is Joe Burrow elite again?
Like happening?
Can we please have some new things to talk about? They're going off old talking points from like 3 years ago. It's bad. It's bad out here.
I don't. Here's the other part. One, stop sending out things that Chris Canty says. Stop sending anything from the Screamy shows, any of them. No, nobody cares. They called us cheap-a-natty today, sending this to me. I don't stop, right? Just you don't need to listen to this. This is a weird thing that's developed that I have a hard time understanding. Why do Bengals fans, because I hear this a lot from you guys, why do we care so much? Why is there this thing that I keep getting this stuff of caring what national media say about the team you like? Like, I don't, who cares, right? You know it's wrong. Okay, it's wrong. They do this to every topic. Okay, they don't know it. They scream and yell stuff about it, and people watch it. That's what's on TV. Okay, that's just what happens. It's the same for the Bengals as it is for the Oklahoma City Thunder. I bet there's a Thunder podcast right now railing on national narratives or something like that. Like, it's just.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, whatever it is. And it's such it reminds me of like Bengals Steelers used to be like this. There was such a little brother syndrome of getting so involved in how they're playing against the Steelers and can't beat the Steelers and what the Steelers are doing and saying. And it doesn't matter. Like, just, it doesn't matter, you know, like it's a little brother thing that's involved in caring what the national media says about you. And so and this comes from someone who's like, don't listen to national media, listen to us, because we know what we're talking about. But that to me, I get tired of the like outrage and caring what these screamy shows are saying, because they're all like this.
Yeah, I feel like there are a few decent people that will like do it thoughtfully in the national media. There's some folks at The Athletic that do, league-wide coverage that's good. But I think what happens to a lot of people is it's tough to distinguish what is real and who's somebody that's good versus, the screamy shows, which are just trying to come up with hot takes every day. And that just reminds me of like the Starbucks baristas misspelling your name on the cup, Because what happens is like, oh, I told them my name was Mark and they spelled it Merk. Look at this. I'm going to put it all over social media. I'm like, yeah, that's by design. They're doing that on purpose. They're misspelling it on purpose. So you're going to put it out there and give them all this free publicity and get people to go there and just keep putting them in the news because they misspelled Christopher with a Y in it for some reason. Like, they're not trying to spell your name properly. They're just trying to get you to notice that. And I feel like that's what a lot of, like, when Canty's like, oh, is Joe Burrow even a good is he even good at football? It's like, he's just trolling. That's all he is he's just professionally trolling. And those are the people we need to tune out permanently.
Have you ever actually been murked? Has anyone murked you?
I don't think I've been murked in a long time because I've just started ordering online and they just slap the sticker on it.
Yeah.
I don't wait in lines anymore, not post-COVID, but it is, you still see those people where they're waiting and, they're looking to see how their name was written on the cup and everything like that. And it's just, people take it way too personally. It's not a spelling bee. They're just getting you your coffee. Is your drink right? Worry about that rather than how many E's they had in Kaylee,
Yeah. I have, so a little bit of my story of the week here is kind of just touching on some of the small. There was two things that happened: small news and non-news. And this kind of touches on what was just said. Small news was what James had, of course, good friend of the program, James Rapine, had a story on the Bengals planning to use the franchise tag on T. Higgins. It's not surprising; it was expected. But having the news there that James did, that's good to know. They're not going to break like a decade-long precedent and let the number one free agent walk. That was it was never something that made sense to do. It was just last Friday we did the history lesson on here about how that literally never happens. Like, the number one free agent will never just walk into free agency, and everybody does it every year. Oh, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, franchise tag. Oh, okay. Well, I guess we're not going to talk about that person as a free agent anymore, because it just doesn't happen, and it hasn't happened in recent years at all. And so that's the small news. Everything that followed that, though, which there was just a lot of talk about the Bengals this week, was really just non-news. It was this whole thing about, oh, look, guess what? The Bengals plan on trying to sign all of these guys. They want to. Well, yeah.
They want these guys on their team.
Was there ever a point where they said something that said they didn't want to. Now, show me the money, right? When it gets done, let's talk about if they actually get it done. It's one thing to say they want to. The last two shows we did basically here, last Thursday, I talked to Jeff Hobson and we had a long conversation, and he was talking about how the tone of Duke Tobin has been, I want to do a deal. I want to do a deal with all these guys. And that was Duke's message. I think there was concern about him talking about needing engagement from the other side at that point in time, but it was still early. We're talking about January at that point. But it was, he wants to do a deal. He was talking about engagement from the other side because he wants to sit down at the table and do a deal. That's been sort of the message here for a while. I don't like that turning into a story. I did not understand. Like, yeah, they want to. That doesn't mean that they will. They still have to come to an agreement. This still has to work itself out, and everybody has to be happy about it. That's where it's at. I mean, we're done with the talk. I mean, the talk on all sides of this. It's just we know what it is. We know what it is. Like, you're going to get it done or you're not. You're going to pick directions here. The talk about who wants what and posturing in the media should be over, I would hope, at this point. I'm sure we'll make tons of a deal. We'll make tons out of whatever Duke or Zach say next week, and we'll parse through that. Hopefully it's something that they haven't really said before that we'll be parsing through. But I just didn't feel like a lot of what was being made out to be news last week was news once James's story came out.
You don't feel that Ryan Rico getting a deal is news? They got their punter locked down, and you're going to gloss over that?
Yeah, I got love for Ryan Rico. Ryan Rico earned that. It was kind of accounting. I mean, because he's exclusive rights free agents, which is what he is. They don't really have any leverage at all. They're just like, we are telling you that you are going to get the league minimum for the next 2 years. But it's a job. And last year, Ryan Rico didn't know where he was going to be. He didn't show up to the beginning of camp. He earned that. He's got that money coming to him. But, extensions for specialists, or really for anybody, but since this just happened. Remember when the Evan McPherson thing happened? And it was like, oh yeah, lock him up. Here we go. And now it's like, everyone's like,
whoops.
Are you sure on the Evan extension? Are we sure this is where you want to be? When can we get out of it? Right. So these things are all fleeting, but it's good news for Ryan Rico. He earned it, and he'll be their punter this year. And that's good for him. He looks like the real deal.
And I'm glad that you clarified too that we're done with the talk about the contract stuff like that because you said we're done with the talk, and I'm like, oh no, not on the podcast, right?
No,
that's
not
pretty
here,
important. That's important to these shows that you do every week. Is the talk that is key.
Is there anything else that we could do? Like, do we just sit here and sort of like do sign language to each other, or just facial expressions? Like,
yes, get cue cards back and forth, just furiously writing things out and holding them up to the camera, and
not quite exactly
as good. Right. That's what people want from an engaging podcast. No words.
I mentioned, you know what? I mentioned a history lesson from last week that we did. We did the history lesson on the number one free agents, and it inspired me, Mark, to do another history lesson this week.
Ooh,
because
going back,
it's just the thing that does keep coming up in a lot of your questions, in a lot of the conversation, thoughtful and screamy, is cheap Bengals and cash spend versus cap spend, and we hear a lot about this. Well, where they spend to the cap, they take on very little dead money, and they don't do the void years and some of these structural things that we've seen of teams like the Eagles really take advantage in terms of being willing to take on dead money and kick money, defer money down the line, and all this stuff. So they can spend more cash on the team, which is theoretically how you get a better team, right? And that's sort of the argument being made, is that the more cash you spend on your team each year, well, the more likely you are to win, because teams are taking advantage of it that way. They're pouring into cash, right? So I was like, I'm just kind of curious. I wanted to have a good feel for the Bengals, the league, and where the success has come from in terms of cash spend. And so I did the last 10 years, so dating back to the 2015 season, looked at the Bengals rank. This is via Spotrac. In their cash spender history, and they have it all ranked. They have who went to the playoffs, who won the Super Bowl, who made the Super Bowl, so you can easily parse through it. The Bengals are pretty clear on who they are, okay? For the last 10 years, they have ranked between 11th and 22nd every single year, except for one, which was in 2022 when they were holding back cash to save for paying Burrow the next year, okay? So in every year, basically, that is normal, they have been in this middle quadrant. Like, we're in the middle. We spend in the middle. We stay in the middle. There's no selling out to go for it with extra cash and kicking money down the line. They go to the cap. The cap is right in the middle of where these teams go, and that keeps them consistent. And that's something Duke Tobin has talked a lot about in the past. Of, look, I want to have a team that I know is good. I don't want to sacrifice future years to take risks this year, whatever. He's talked about having consistent level of spend every year to keep yourself in the mix to have a chance to go win it. That's caused debate and frustration among some fans, but that's where it is. That's where their cash spend lives. Okay. Now, is that a problem? Was my next question. So
what does history say about that?
History says in the last 10 years, teams that spend in the top 8, okay, so the top quadrant, which has never included the Bengals. It's really interesting because I was like top 8 and bottom 8. Let's put them against each other because there's been 130 playoff teams in the last 10 years and 20 Super Bowl participants, right? So if you were looking at trying to get the breakdown by quadrants, what would you be talking about? 5 Super Bowl participants and about a little more than 30 in the playoffs, right? Per each quadrant. That is exactly where the top quadrant and the bottom quadrant sits. So playoff participants in the top 8, 33. Super Bowl participants in the top 8, 5. 1 champ.
Interesting.
Bottom 8, playoff participants 31. Super Bowl participants 5, 4 champs. Okay. So then in the middle, that leaves 10 playoff participants, 5 champs, and 66 playoff teams, which average out to 33. They're all the same. Like
what you're saying is the Bengals don't need to spend money at all. They could be even cheaper. No.
I'm saying the idea. I'm saying the idea that this teams that are working it to spend extra cash every year or that live in the top 5 in cash spend are, this like proven method of success is false, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's not true. It's the same in the bottom 8 as the top 8, same in the middle as the top 8. It's a non-factor. There are so many other factors that are more important. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be out there trying to find out. It might be different this year. They might end up in the top 8 this year if they have to utilize a bunch of cash to try to make these deals happen and change their ways a little bit. And that could be how they change their ways. It could get them into the top 8 once. They could use void years and deferred money and all that stuff. We've been talking about that stuff. But in terms of like needing to live in this top of the cash spend in order to win, that's not necessarily been true. And now there's been trends the last 4 years. You see a little bit more. Philadelphia is notable this year. I mean, they're the first in the last 10 years to be a champ that came from the top 8 is Philadelphia this year. So there's some recency in this conversation, but as a whole, it's not really as much of a thing, I think, as it sometimes gets made out to be. You have to be creative. You got to find ways to do stuff, but the end of the day, it doesn't really determine much of where success comes from.
Yeah, it's easy, and a lot of people want to point to the Eagles and say, oh, wow, look, they paid all their guys, but they did pay some of them earlier than, waiting to the last possible moment and most expensive moment. The other thing they did is they drafted really well on that defense. There's so many young stars, and they just crushed their draft picks. That's the discouraging part, because like I hear your history lesson. I'm like, okay, well, the Bengals don't have to be crazy good at spending all this money, throwing all this cash. That's not really what's going to translate. But when you look at that second component of like, well, you also have to draft pretty good too and spend some money. It's, it's more of a mix of all of this stuff. That is a little bit more discouraging, especially when you look at, the 12 draft picks last year and they missed on so many of them.
Yeah. It's that's my point is it's getting the value out of the money that you're spending. It's, they can point to how much money they spent on their defensive line last year and how much draft capital they used on it. The defensive line stunk, and it's a problem because they spent it bad and the picks weren't coming through, right? Like it's not like and that's true with every team. You can win on the margins, and that's important. You can win on the margins with some of the stuff you dabble in with contracts and cash spend. But the idea that you're just going to go spend your way to it, it's getting the value out of it and the evaluation, and it's always going to be about that. No matter what we spend February screaming and yelling about in terms of cash and cap and money and structures and things like that.
That's a good history lesson as we get into this next
history
period.
Lesson for the discussion, just to drop it in there.
Good primer.
You know what? Perspective.
Are you ready for some Growl Pal questions? We had some good ones come into the Growler Podcast at gmail.com. Keep sending in your questions. Also, keep putting out good vibes about the show. Leave a review on whatever podcast app you listen on. That stuff helps in a big way. So keep doing that. Keep sending your questions. Are you ready for this first one, Paul?
I am ready.
So this is from Michael. He's got, I think, like 2 or 3 questions here. So we'll just tackle these one at a time. Longtime listener checking in from Central Ohio. He's got some questions he's been wondering about. The first is, how significant is the change in O-line and D-line coaches? We've lost so many games due to poor trench play. Are there guys like Andrew Whitworth or Geno Atkins that you could get on the show or even off the record to give some insight into how significant the coaching is?
We had Whit on the show. And he was awesome, by the way.
He was very good.
Recommend. It's actually a good one to go back to and listen to now, because he talks a lot about roster construction and distractions and fighting players over contracts on there. And he talks about his experience. So if you're looking for a show to go back on and listen to, that is a great one. I don't know that we specifically went into like O-line coaches on that show. So yeah, maybe we'll need to get Whit. I'm guessing he'll probably be at the combine, maybe. So maybe if I see Whit, we'll catch up with him there, ask him a little bit about that. Geno Atkins, I'd love to get Geno Atkins. I've been trying to talk to Geno Atkins since he was in his prime. So
yeah,
I
probably not coming anytime soon.
I think offensive line coaches are exponentially more important than defensive line coaches. I think defensive line coaches, cool. Like, a good one is nice. And a really good to great offensive line coach is a game changer. And a bad one is a game changer. You can get away with a bad defensive line coach, I guess. You just have dudes, right? Like, just that's a personnel driven position. I think it's you have things you need to do. There's teaching how, in getting the more out of people. I think that's certainly part of it. But far more part of it is offensive line. Second most important coach in the building, in my opinion, outside of the head coach, is the offensive line coach, because everything is affected by that. The chemistry is so important amongst that group, teaching it together, teaching it the right way, having everybody on the same page is what makes a good offensive line. So we'll see. We'll see if Scott Peters is the answer. I look forward to talking to him a little more in Indianapolis as well about some of his thoughts on the guys and what he looks for in players and the current group and everything. So yeah, a lot to look into there. But yeah, I mean, I think that change will be an important one as we get into next season.
All right. His second question here is about Trey Hendrickson. He mentioned that you touched on it a little bit with Charlie earlier, but it's something that he's observed as well. Hendrickson does get sacks, but he equally gives up chunk plays because he loses contain by going so far around the edge to try to get sacks. Why is there the big push by Joe Burrow to extend him if he's bad against the run and loses the lane rush discipline and is also reaching the age cliff?
Well, I think that's a little over the top of assessing Trey. I mean, Trey is not just, to say he's bad against the run. He's fine. Like, it's not great. It's not his strength. He's also maybe one of the best pass rushers in football. Like, I mean, that's where the value is. That's what the value of the edge rush position is. And I mean, it's nice if you can play the run. That's great if you're fully, able to do it all. It's huge. Like, that's a big deal. But like, it's nothing compared to just go get that dude, finish games, close games out. So I think the fact that you have that and he could be your closer is important. I think the other thing is wanting Trey to get paid and fighting for your guy to get paid is not wrong. Like, and that's not a problem, because it also drives up his trade value. I mean, the idea of he deserves to be paid the top of the league. He's one of the best in the league. He's awesome. I want him. That's nothing but leverage for the Bengals in a trade if they would want to do that. And fighting for his guy to get paid because he's saying you can. Like, I also don't know how. Maybe I'm underestimating Joe. I don't know how much Joe's like diving into the edge rusher age cliff analytics.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe he is.
Right.
I think he's like, look, I like Trey. I watch Trey be a badass. I want him to continue to be a badass so I can win the Super Bowl this year. Let's go get some money. Let's just use it. We're the stars. We're the ones doing this, right? I mean, he's one of the most valuable assets on the team, Trey is. So I don't see a problem with that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with fighting for your guys anywhere. It doesn't mean it's going to happen. Or where his numbers are going to land at, or what's going to go on there. But
yeah, I do put that
fighting for it
in a little different category than him fighting for his weapons. Then if he's going to go on a limb for T. Higgins, that's a little bit different. But if you're the franchise player too, you can't go on all these shows during Super Bowl week and be like, let me talk to you guys about the age cliff on defensive ends.
Exactly.
I've got a chart here that I want you guys to look at. Now, T. Higgins is one thing, but please look at this supporting documentation I have brought here to Media Row.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to go over well, especially when you look at the season he had, MVP numbers, Jamar Chase, Triple Crown, and the reason they didn't get to the playoffs is because of the defense. So are you really going to take the one good part of that defense and throw him under the bus with your charts and your age cliff? And I'm with you. You got to just stick up for your guy. That sets the tone, even if it results in him ending up on a different team in a trade, whatever. You're not going to help things by talking that down and being like, well, he's getting up there in years, or he's really not great look at his numbers against the run. He's just fine. And we kind of need somebody if we're going to pay him. And then all of a sudden you're like, what is Joe Burrow saying here on First Take? This does not make sense.
You don't see a lot of Radio Row smear campaigns,
on your own team.
Yeah. Just of your own defensive player of the year. He's here as well because you just were hanging with him in the Pro Bowl, and he's about to be up for Defensive Player of the Year award at NFL Honors, and your quarterback is just giving you just absolutely owning you on every single show that he goes on. You don't see that a lot.
Michael's third question. Nobody mentions that Myles Murphy was best from the left side of the line in college. What's the impact for him if he could go back to the left and also get improved coaching? Another potential reason to trade Hendrickson and get a second-round draft pick while saving huge cap space.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you think I'm backing off my Myles Murphy take at this point, you're wrong. I have only one out. I have only one out left, and that is just deny until something good happens and to say I was right. Okay? That's all I've got left. I appreciate that. I can't run from 0 sacks. Okay? I'm just going to – he didn't play enough. All right. And his win rate numbers were average amongst first and second round draft picks. Okay. That played the last few years. It was just he didn't have production because he didn't finish as well. And he didn't get anywhere near the same amount of snaps to get better at it as everybody else. That's what I'm going to hang on to right now. It's the only thing I have going for me on my prediction of him having the breakout year. I still saw the flashes and the rookie year flashes that made sense. His trajectory made sense, that he could be a real dude. He's got all the physical traits. It's just a matter of the fact that we haven't quite seen it yet. So I'm going to hang on to that. And yes, so I'm here with you.
I really respect that.
Maybe a switch, maybe a new coach, maybe actually playing more will help Myles Murphy live up to it. I'm not down on Myles Murphy.
You're like the band on the Titanic, just playing as it slowly sinks into the ocean.
This is not the
boat's
Titanic.
Going down.
Myles Murphy is not the Titanic.
The boat is going down, and you're out there saying, put him on the left side of the line. There's still hope. 0 sacks. Forget about it. He can't beat out Joseph Osai for playing time, but that's okay. He's going to be the future. You got to go down with your pick on the ship, and I feel like you're making the right call with that.
it's like you're looking at the captain of the ship, and he's got like an old triptych from AAA that he's working off of instead of Google Maps, and you're like, oh, that's a little concerning, right? I can't get past. I'm having trouble getting past that. That doesn't mean we still won't find the way. We found the way back in the day with the triptych, okay? So I still think that Myles Murphy can find the way. I still think there's hope. I have said before, I think the ceiling that I thought probably isn't all the way there in terms of what he could develop into, but I think he can. I'm still in. I'm still in. I'm not giving up.
You sound like you're telling people to buy stock in Blockbuster in 2005. You're like, Netflix is nothing to worry about. The bounce back is coming. He's gonna really flourish next year.
Wait till you see how people feel nostalgic about tapes one day.
Our next question. This is from Paul C. I think I'm enjoying the pods more in the offseason than in season. So much speculation, and it all seems hopeful and positive. I don't know if it all seems hopeful and positive. You need to read some of the emails we're getting. He says, we know the issues with the Bengals and how they do contracts is driven by the bottom line. With news this week of how much the salary cap has gone up, it's hard to look at the numbers they'll have to pay Chase and Higgins now and laugh at this team being, to steal an English phrase, a la full kit wanker, penny wise and pound foolish. If they got Higgins done 2 years ago and Chase last year, they'd have saved infinitely more money. Why do they never learn from this? Why do they insist on pushing everything to the deadline? Do they not look at how much money, even in these two instances, they've squandered by dragging their feet in an effort to quote unquote win a contract negotiation? And do you think they should change things? It's so frustrating. I saw this coming all last year. Keep up the great work. Look forward to the combine coverage.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt they have squad. Yeah, I mean, throw T, Jesse, throw it all in there. Jamar, obviously. I mean, you're right. I don't think there's denying that. They value information over that. They want to have as much information as they can and then work the negotiation until the bitter end, basically, in order to try to get it down to wherever they can get out of it. I don't agree with that philosophy necessarily. That is the way it's kind of consistently worked with their biggest contracts over the years, and pushing them forward, as they have usually liked having the information and in terms of what that player really is. They've gone in early before. I mean, Carlos Dunlap was a notable one where they were like, oh man, they're paying a guy who hasn't hardly even started, and ended up being a great deal on a contract for them. And even Geno Atkins, when they paid him, and you're going on the Wayback Machine now, you'd probably like to see more of that from them these days. You haven't. So I don't, it's true. I don't know that it's news. Necessarily, this has been the case that it's kind of blown up in their face with some of these that have done really well, but they like having all the information of exactly what that player is, and on and off the field, and through more years of seeing it and making sure that they're the right players they want to invest in. Are they going to have an injury, whatever? Like, you don't want to pay a guy and then he immediately gets hurt. That could happen at any point. But again, that's the way they've done things. I don't know that any of us have the power to change the way that they choose to negotiate and operate. So
you're saying no big lessons will be learned from those two instances?
I don't feel like there will be lessons learned. I mean, maybe. I don't know. I mean, I doubt it.
As our next question, this mentions a media outlet that you're familiar with, The Athletic. He says that, as you know, The Athletic just published a list of one cut candidate per team, and I wondered if there were any names in there that the Bengals would like to see come available. He mentions Devontae Adams and Joey Bosa, a few others, but what are some of the cut names on that list, or potential cut candidates do you think would be interesting to the Bengals this offseason?
Well, I wouldn't foresee. It's possible if they were looking for any of these guys on this list, they would look into probably on your very low bargain type contract, but that's not something that they have done a ton of. We've been pretty critical of that. I mean, whether you're talking about the Calais Campbells of the world or, some of these guys that you've seen some of these 1 year cheap deal, older guys been able to squeeze one more year out and have been able to have a positive effect on some teams. You might see a little bit of that, but I don't think a ton. From the Bengals. I look more at a different brand here that was on that list than some of the names that you mentioned. Miles Sanders, they're going to be looking for running backs. So perhaps, and this is all under the understanding that you're not paying these guys. And I mean, they're discarded for a reason by these teams because they're not worth it anymore to pay them. So you're talking about getting them at a lesser cost. I'm really curious about Jair Alexander. I don't know what's going to happen with him. There's a lot going on in Green Bay that seems to be malfunctioning. But man, when he's been good, he's been arguably one of the best cornerbacks in football. Can he still be that? Is there other problems going on there? I don't know. John Thornton has been his agent, a guy who's worked closely with the Bengals for a long time, lives here in Cincinnati, friend of the program. And so I'd be curious if John could help bridge that gap. With a better understanding specifically of Jair. I don't know. I just don't know enough about his situation. And I don't think people in Green Bay know enough about his situation up there right now about what exactly is going on. Braden Smith from the Colts is on that list. He's an offensive tackle who's had injury issues. Could he be a swing tackle candidate this year if he came in at a lower price? If T left, Christian Kirk would be an interesting name on that list. Who you could probably get in that mid-level downgraded tier, but certainly could be productive across from Jamar Chase with Burrow throwing to him. Kendrick Bourne on that list could be competition for wide receiver 3 and 4 area with Andre Yosevich. Old friend Larry Ogunjobi was on the list. Maybe there's a reunion in the depth role that you could see happen coming back over from Pittsburgh. Jonathan Allen was probably one of the most interesting ones on there for me. A guy who wants to win. Would he be interested in a 1 year prove it ring chase type deal? How far down does his price go to come here to Cincinnati? I'd be interested in seeing him. So there's some new names. I like going through that list because it's not the same names that we see in free agency, but they're very likely to see a lot of these names in the mix. But Jonathan Allen, certainly I'm the most curious about because he could give them some impact at a position of need. And if he was let go and was looking for a prove it, man, this would seem like a nice spot for him potentially.
Yeah, that'd be really nice to see him in stripes. Our next question. So what a big offseason for the boys. You all get to talk about Trey, and of course, Jermaine Pratt. Soon we'll have free agency, the draft, and another Jermaine Burton eviction. Which leads me to my question. Which second-year player are you most confident in contributing in 2025? So you can run, pass, or boot the following: Chris Jenkins, McKinley Jackson, or Josh Newton. How do you run, pass, or boot those as the most likely to contribute?
I like this. This is really close. So I like a close run, pass, or boot. I'm gonna lean McKinley Jackson. I just think you like the flashes that you saw from him in terms of as a rookie and like, hey, made some splash plays. He showed up, as a guy that could maybe be productive and give you something every game from a position that doesn't always produce splash plays, tends to be less splashy. So I'll say that. I'll pass on Josh Newton because I think they really like him. They liked what he showed at the end of the season. I think he's a candidate to be in the mix, and if he could be he's going to be in a competition in camp. I can tell you that much. And he had a great camp last year. If he had kind of another great camp this year, he could be a starter day one. I don't think that's out of the question in their eyes. I think they look at all of those guys in the same boat. Mostly, whether you're talking about Dax or CTB or DJ Turner or Josh Newton, even DJ Ivy, who've all had moments. And if they can get better and prove they can take a step, they can go snag a job. Like I don't think anything is totally set in that room other than a bunch of talented young players they think all have, the arrows up on. So it has me booting Chris Jenkins. which I don't like to do. I'm not like out on Chris Jenkins. I just, I think you're going to see an influx of draft picks and probably a free agent in there that he's going to have to compete with. He's going to, I just think you're going to see some new pieces they're going to want to get in the mix. He's going to have to take a step to be a bigger contributor next year. But you could really say that about all three of these guys. So I think it's a great question. I think they're all kind of in that same boat. A lot of second-year players end up being that. So we'll see how they develop. But yeah, I guess that's where I'm going with it. But it's all very close. I feel bad having to boot Chris Jenkins.
Yeah, but it makes sense from the standpoint of Newton's going to have more of an opportunity, probably.
Yeah.
And
he has
McKinley Jackson, he looked a lot quicker than I expected him to be, and that he at least will have a role in that rotation. A situational guy. Like he's gonna have his chances too. So I could definitely see that shaking out that way. I still have high hopes for Jenkins as well. I'm not, on the Jenkins bandwagon quite like you stumped for Myles Murphy, but I do feel like he still has potential for this team. And I'm excited to see him as well. But next question, our last question today, we're going to get into the book world a little bit. Longtime listener, first-time emailer. My question is, if you could commission a tell-all book about a Bengals season, which would you choose from the following: 1992, Dawn of the Dave Shula era, 2003, Marvin Lewis Culture Change, or 2010, the year that broke Carson Palmer? What book do you want to read?
Well, the year that broke Carson Palmer. I mean, I just, there's so much behind the scenes that happened there that I'm just curious about. We've heard some of it. I mean, we've heard, he's kind of, the story's been told. Carson's told his story before mostly. So I think that, but I'm interested. And the Marvin Lewis Culture Change, no one wants to read a book about good things happening. That's not interesting or entertaining. Like, look how things got better and everybody was doing.
Everyone was happy.
Yeah. Look at that. Rainbows and unicorns. No, nobody wants that. I mean, and then the Dave Shula era, I might move it to the top 5. I would amend it. Give me a book on the entire Dave Shula era from beginning. Cause I'm the end. I'm loved when there was just no respect and it was just truly awful and everything was bad. And no one understood what was going on. That might be one that I would be interested in writing, would be the true Dave Shula era, just out of just how absurd it was in the level of bad.
If you're looking to the question, and it's if you could commission this tell-all book, I feel like you're underselling the Marvin Lewis Culture Change because of the year. Like it's, you got to look, when you're trying to sell a book, you're trying to sell it to a certain demographic who's going to actually buy a book and read a book. And it's not a lot of young people. It's going to be older people. Like I love the printed word as much as the next guy, but more than the next guy for sure, for my age. But I'm going to go with that middle era is happier, and you're going to get some more old guys that remember that era fondly and would like to sit down and read more about that stuff and have some good nostalgia. I'm out here trying to sell books, and I feel like that's my best way to get there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. You're exactly right. We should go back. We should actually probably do books about like the 80s or the 70s at that point. Let's just focus on the only people that are going to be. We were out. It was last week. We were out at Zips over in Mount Lookout, and there was a man by himself reading the newspaper, and I just wanted to. Yeah, I was like, wait, is this like where they put one of those wax figures in somewhere to make it look like it used to back in the day? It's like watching a relic right in front of my eyes. I wanted to go shake his hand and tell him how much I appreciate him and wish there were more people like him. But he was just sitting there alone, reading his newspaper, having a little burger, and I was like, man, this is the guy that what could have been, what used to be.
You should have gotten closer to him to see what date was on that newspaper. He could have been a time traveler reading up on, whatever happened in 1993. Because I don't know if that was a current newspaper or not. That's the big question. Oh, before I get to the comedy plugs, I do want to tell people to keep sending their emails to the growlerpodcast@gmail.com. And we got to get to this Disney trip. So I'll throw out a few dates real quick. And then we got to get to what everyone really tuned in for this episode, is to hear your Disney recap. But I'm in Grand Rapids this weekend. So if you live in Michigan, come out Friday, Saturday. I'll be at the Louisville Comedy Club February 27th. Back to Zany's in Nashville on March 3rd for the Nate Land live show and the Monday show at the regular room. I'll be at the Cary Theater in North Carolina March 21st. Tickets are on sale for that now. And I'm headlining the Don't Tell show in Asheville, North Carolina on March 22nd. And I'm also starting to plan the summer tour and fall dates. So if there's a city that we have a Growl Pal in that I should come to your city, send me an email and let me know where you live, where I should come play. Because it's always fun to have some Growl Pals in the audience. And, it doesn't matter what city I'm in. I usually get like at least one or two will come out at some point during the weekend. And it's always a good vibes, good times. It even happened at Commonwealth Sanctuary. I thought, I was like, okay, local room. There's going to be a lot more Growl Pals here. Nope, still just the one table. Just the one person, and it was Stanio. Stanio came out, our guy.
Hey.
So it was nice to see the Stanios out there. But yeah, so send me your recommendations for cities I should add to the tour.
Love it.
Are you ready to get into Disney?
Yeah, sure.
How was it? Give us the scoop. How'd the trip go? What lessons did you learn? What right, life lessons did you leave with?
There's a few lessons here. One, you want me to start with the good or the bad or the weird?
Oh, I want to start with the good.
Okay.
It's Dey Light.
The good. The Magic Kingdom fireworks show is the thing that lives up to the hype, right?
Okay.
Like, now I'm not a fireworks guy, and I'm definitely not a crowds guy, right? Which is so it's you would think this wouldn't set up.
Yeah.
Disney just does everything better, right? In terms when it comes to shows or entertainment at all. And just the way it comes at the end of the day, and you've had your day at the park and all these like fun times with your kids and everybody's standing there. And then this like insane show, because it's the music, it's you've got the castle in front of you, and the fireworks go up behind the castle, and it's all tied together, and it's just unbelievable. Like it feels like this culmination. It's truly like an emotional fireworks show, which I just never thought I would ever feel an emotion other than fear of like that guy that's setting off those fireworks in the tubes over there. I don't know if I trust him, right? I never thought I'd feel emotions, but you do. Like, it's just, there's something about it. It's like the most magical thing in the most magical place on earth. My daughter, my youngest, was up on my shoulders, and we're watching, and we're in the crowd, but we're centered up, and she's everything is blowing her mind. Like, she sees, it's Aladdin on the castle, and look, Ariel, and look, it's pink. Look at all the pink, Daddy, blah, blah, blah. And she just looks down at me and goes, I think I might cry happy tears. And I was like, wow.
You did it.
Like, it's unbelievable. I mean, to evoke that, she's never talked about happy tears before, like, and having them, like, feeling the emotions at the age of 5. That's so the fireworks show, I will say, whatever trouble you have to go through to be there, to be a part of it, to have a decent view of it, and make sure your kids take it in. I think it's the number one thing in Disney World.
It takes a lot of, but I feel like those happy tears help, when you're carving that car out of the snow. You're digging out a few more of those happy tears, melt the snow down for you. And
when you're in the lines, and when you're, you're going through the stuff, and you're trying to figure out your transportation, and you're thinking about, okay, there's going to be a happy tears moment. Okay. And so we're going to keep our focus on that. There's no doubt about it. The bad.
Okay, let's get into bad.
Not bad. I will just say it's important to remember that the Orlando airport is awful. Okay, it's terrible. Yeah. It's an awful airport. Everything about it is bad, and you need to be aware of that going into it. We landed, the moment you step into that airport, you're like, wow, it's really crowded in this gate. No, it's just crowded everywhere. Okay. And nobody quite knows what they're doing. Like, we went to the carousel to get our bags, and everything's broken, and they're just like, the thing's not working. They're just tossing them up over the top. People are climbing over top of everything to try to get bags. you pass a Delta counter with like 300 people in line. Like it's madness everywhere you go. Just know that. Be mentally prepared going in for the Orlando airport. You don't want anything. You don't want anything to be like on the line when you get there. Just say that much. It's not good. The funny thing about like is how much you have to really focus on, like you mentioned, online order. You should never stand in a food line. Do not do it. There's no reason to do it. You don't want to do this. Order everything online, get your food online, have it waiting for you, go pick it up. You see these people in these long lines to get food, and it's like, don't do it to yourself. It's
you blew it. Yeah.
When your kids are hungry, you need to be getting them food. Be planning ahead on your meals, be online ordering, be setting them up for a time to walk up there and get there. Just go through that trouble. It's worth it. Okay. You're gonna want to do that. The weird for me, adults at Disney.
You mean like adults without
adults,
kids?
Adults without kids.
Okay.
At Disney. I saw a grown man hug Peter Pan for a vastly inappropriate amount of time. like 15 to 20 seconds holding the embrace, whispering in Peter Pan's ear. And I just don't know what to think of that. Like, I'm not really sure I understand what's going on there. I'm happy for you. Do your thing, have your moment. I'm not here to tell anybody. I just don't understand it. Okay. I don't.
Yeah.
We did a breakfast in Cinderella's castle, which is quite the thing. It's a fun splurge that you can do. But there was like, my kids thought it was, they're in the castle. There's all these princesses. For my kids at 7 and 5, it's like perfect for them. So it's worth it. But then you have like, just like a couple that's dating in their early 30s, it appeared, who are just in there. And the princesses are coming around and they get excited and stand up and take pictures with them. And they get the wands and the swords. And they're like, man, hey, I guess you just want to do everything. I don't understand it. I don't totally understand that part. Like, I get it when you're trying to do it to give your kids an experience and do something cool. That's what the Magic Kingdom especially is. So it's just weird to see sort of adults living that life as well. There's a lot of weird involved in that.
And I don't know if it's worth understanding either. I think you have the right approach of like, just give them a wide berth, let them have their thing, and let's try not to dig into this too deeply, because I'm not sure we want to find the answers that are here for why these Disney adults are the way that they are.
Yeah. They do these, they do the lightning lanes, right? Where you sign up, you can get there's different packages you can get or whatever. There has never been a lightning lane that I've been like, that wasn't worth it ever. Where if we had one, the idea of spending 80 minutes in a line to do anything, really, it sounds awful. But the idea of spending 80 minutes in a line to ride like Winnie the Pooh on LSD ride, where you're in there for 30 seconds and it's just weird, and then you come out of it and I'm like, people are standing in line for over an hour to do that. That is unbelievable. And there's no time that wasn't happy that I had a lightning lane for any of these things that you can go on, because there's just so many rides that you don't understand why, but they just are. They're long, and you're just like, I don't know why people are standing in this line, and it looks totally miserable. So I would certainly advise to, with it, whatever you want to do, however many rides you want to go on, give it some pretty serious consideration.
How much is the lightning lane? Is that just an upgrade per ride? Is that
it's an upgrade? It depends on what the package is for the day or whatever. Like, you can get different levels of lightning lanes. You can get stuff that's like full, as many as you want. There, you can get 3 at a time. You can pick them. There's different levels. It's, what is it worth to you? But I just say, that's the thing, is the amount of line standing. The most you can avoid that is it's worthwhile. Just keep Get as many ways to get ahead of the lines as possible, which I don't know that that's breaking news for anybody that's been there, but you just end up in these. You could end up in some really undesirable situations if you're not planning a little bit for what you're doing next.
That's good to know.
Really undesirable.
And at the end of the day, the happy tiers, it's there's no price that they're not worth, although Disney will find a high price for those tiers. They will put a number on it, but it'll be worth it.
It'll be expensive. That's the thing is, like, it's expensive. Everything about it's expensive. There's nothing cheap that you can do there, really. But I think it's the one place that makes it worth it. Like I feel like you get the value out of it from if that's what you're going for. If you're there to give your kids and yourself as parents like experiences and know that it's done right and feel like you were treated right and this is as good as it can be, in terms of that type of entertainment, you get that. Like you get the top of the top. Everybody's like super nice. Every show you see is way better than you would ever expect. Every interaction is great with whether it's with characters or the parade goes by and it's like the most ridiculous float you've ever seen in your life. Like everything is just better than you would ever think. They earn it. Okay. Like you're paying for quality, you get quality in terms of what you're doing. So I do think it's worth it, but there's, they challenge that number. There's no question.
Yeah. But how many days did you have to play the pool card? I know you talked about that, about like, hey, if the day doesn't go the way you plan, just go hit that pool. That was a big part of the Polynesian experience for you. So how often were you in that pool?
We did 1.5 pool days. So we had one full day that we just took off and did the pool. And then another day we kind of halved out of and did about a half of it. So we didn't have to hit the card. Like the kids were great. So we didn't really have to hit the pool card too often, but it was there. And was happy with, I mean, it was pretty, the Polynesian's awesome. It's a real like transportation into Hawaii. You feel like you're in Hawaii the entire time you're there. Like it really is. In like Hawaii 1976. Don Ho's there.
Yeah.
John Lennon is breaking up the Beatles in that room. Like, it feels like everything feels like it's Hawaii 1976 and has never changed. And that was pretty. It was pretty neat. It was pretty neat.
Getting the full recap, I think this is a good time to mention that if there's anybody out there that owns a company that would like to advertise on the podcast, send us those emails now, as you're going to have to pay for all these lightning lanes somehow. We'll have 6 new podcast forms for you next week that Paul starts doing 32 a week just to pay off all of these lightning lanes.
Or, and anyone from Disney, if you'd like to. Just sponsor these segments. I can continue to go on about Disney World, anything about it that you're interested in. I'm here.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure the corporation would love to sink some money into this show after you've attacked Disney adults as being weirdos and just cutting off that revenue stream for them. Paul, with more hot takes about how people spend their money.
Yeah, I don't think the Orlando airport's going to be advertising here.
We've lost them.
But I think I'm okay with that. With that. It gave me an appreciation for someone that I would love to get on board.
That's real tough for you, too. You're going from Disney World to the NFL Combine. Those could not be two different places. But, have fun out there in Indianapolis. We'll look forward to those shows.
Yes, it'll be great. Looking forward to it, too. And we'll catch up with everybody from Indianapolis next week. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time.